It's like Kung Fu Panda. Yes, that's right. I've quoted
I
the logic of. Well, you are missing. See, because you don't have a 5 and a 7-year-old son, but you still need to go see it.
Well, he's too busy watching Desperate Housewives.
You're watching X-Files reruns. The point in Kung Fu Panda is that there is no secret ingredient. The point, to our listeners that are concerned about term limits, that are concerned about honesty in government, you have the ultimate veto authority. Every 2 years, you have the ability to vote somebody out of office. And unfortunately, the electorate is just as responsible for the mishaps happening in Washington. The media is complicit, and I would argue that stations like this that offer a contrarian voice, I salute you guys, but we all know that the lamestream media has been complicit in what has been this massive government takeover in the last 18 months. But Randy from Leland, who I believe is your questioner, wanted to know what guarantees there were. I would offer to Randy that character is a pretty good indicator in somebody's life experiences. And while I don't claim to have the lock on anything, and in fact I'm probably more flawed than any other candidate that's ever run for Congress, I would offer you this, that I'm honest, I'm hardworking, and I've looked down the barrel of a gun on a couple of different occasions, and I don't blink. And if you want to send somebody to Congress that's going to represent you, that's not going to be afraid of special interests, that's not going to be afraid of his own party, and tell them to go pack sand if they're wrong, or celebrate the moments when they're right, and that there's time for conviction, and we all have to stick together. I'm willing to work with anybody that's willing to work with us, as long as they're doing things that I think represent our constitutional values. And in that sense, what guarantees are there? You can look at somebody's track record, you can look at somebody's life experience, and I think that one of the things that I would offer to Randy and to the rest of your listeners is that I'm a guy who has consistently turned down personal gain and financial reward for service. I mean, I left Goldman Sachs to go start my own business because I thought there was a lot of moral corruption that I was exposed to. I had opportunities to go to very exciting Ivy League schools, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps at 17. I had a very successful business in New York, and I left all after 9/11, the attacks of 9/11. I left all of that so I could serve in the Marine Corps, make $30,000 a year. I wrote a book about my experiences, and instead of going into media again or back into trading or anything else, I became a sheriff's deputy for $30,000 a year again. I keep putting on polyester and name tags. Why? Why? I like having the name on my chest, not just because I forget sometimes my own name because I'm old. But, I found that when you have a name on your chest, the irony is that you don't work for yourself. You work typically for others, and you're a public servant, and there's something about the name being on your chest that means I work for you. And that's something that I'm accustomed to. It's something that's important to me. It's values that are important to me. Service is important to me. But I would tell Randy, there are no guarantees, Randy. The only guarantee, Randy, is you. The guarantee is that you mobilize. The guarantee is that you, the voters, the electorate, pay attention. And, and the media needs to be not complicit in allowing government to, conduct all this skullduggery, but in fact be the watchdog that they're supposed to be. And when Chris Matthews is talking about the chill that runs down his leg when a candidate who then becomes the president, that's complicit in frankly, in government scandal. And that's, the job of the media is to check and balance the government, not be complicit.
Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to point out, we were talking about this off the mic, and I mentioned one of my favorite movies, Boiler Room, where Ben Affleck's character is asked, someone's trying to sell him stock, and he says, the guy asked what the firm minimum was, and the guy said, 200, 300, and he goes, no, that's wrong. The firm minimum is $0. If you don't like what I'm selling, don't buy it. And I look at it that way when it comes to the politicians. If you don't like the politician, you don't have to elect them in office.
Right. And term limits are the same thing. I think we started to talk about that before. Now, there's a little bit of variance, and I'm for term limits in the Congress, and particularly the Congress even over the Senate, because the Congress has a 95% recidivism. Oh, recidivism might be the wrong word. I think that's the word you use when somebody's been released from jail and keeps finding their way back. But which of course is the irony of talking about bonds and term limits. But the idea that an incumbent is able to hold the seat 95% of the time, part of the reason for that is it takes a tremendous amount of money to stage a race successfully. And then you've got this built-in name recognition, which is often what you need to use that money for. And so if you're the incumbent, like Mike McIntyre, for example, and you've been up there for 14 years, well, you've been in the newspaper an awful lot. And you've had the opportunity, if you've been a pork hunter, you've had the opportunity to bring all of that pork back to the district on a regular basis. And you've made lots of friends of people that you've helped employ or whatever the case. Of course, the silent killer of all that pork is that money is really all of our money. And that check that shows up to that one district project meant that the factory had to close and 3 different shifts were laid off and two people lost a job and another 7 are are underemployed, right? That's the secret. People, the unemployment numbers in this district are staggering, not for what's reported, but for what's not reported. And the underemployment, the MBA that's working as a barista, serving coffee. I mean, literally, I heard, I think it was the chairwoman of UNCW say we have the most educated wait staff in the world. And there's a lot of men and women out here that have degrees that are highly educated, that are well trained, that are equipped to take on future challenges. But unless we have demand to stimulate business growth, there is no business. And unless we can reduce the tax burden, there won't be demand. So what we don't realize is, well, let's ratchet up the taxes. We need more money to fuel this government spending. Well, wait a second. We're choking ourselves out. We need to release that yoke. When we do that, that will allow people to start using their own dollars wisely. And when they make those decisions to invest, and because frankly, the left has spent a lot of time trying to redistribute everybody's income. They need to spend a little bit more time creating wealth. Wealth isn't something to be redistributed. Wealth is something to be created. How do you do that? Hard work, savings, entrepreneurial risk-taking. And right now we have a government that's trying to flatten, stifle, and remove all of that. We need less impediment and less government, not more.
Right, and you see that all the time. That's why I looked up here. It was Benjamin Franklin that said, when the people find they can vote themselves money, that will herald the end of the republic. And I feel like that's what we've seen, especially since the war on poverty. They come in and they say, we're going to give you this, and you deserve free health care. Just vote us in, and you deserve all of this money. I mean, look, all this money that's yours. Well, it was ours to begin with, and let us have it back.
Well, last night on the show we talked about they're building a new housing project here, and they're building 1,500 square foot apartments for a 2-bedroom, 1,500 square foot apartment. And I said, I'm glad that we're giving people homes, but that just seems like a really big apartment. I mean, I've joked I lived in a 2.5 bedroom apartment. It was 1,200 square feet, so it wasn't even that big. And it just seems that there's
and yours sure wasn't free.
Yeah, that's true. And it just seems funny that there's just all these people out there that just have their hand out. And it's funny because you'll never hear Democrats talk about JFK all the time. Comparing Obama, JFK, he's great. But they'll never quote that line he said where, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. No Democrat says that anymore. But that was their motto back in the day, and that was, I think, a lot of people were glad to hear that. And now it's just everyone saying, what can the country do for me?
That expectation of the entitlement culture is absolutely, I'm running for Congress so I can promote job creation, so I can protect the homeland, and so I can preserve conservative values. And one of the, I think, the most important conservative values is a sense of doing for yourself and not having a reliance or an expectation that you're going to be provided for. It's what we were talking about in one of the other segments. Mm-hmm. You have an equal opportunity to be unequal. That's what America provides you. That's what people die for to get here. And it's important we remember that. I'd like to talk for a moment about some of the other dimensions to how we're actually going to create jobs here. And one of the things, because everyone talks about job creation, and yes, tax is obviously a real impediment to that, but there are other things too. Our manufacturing base in this country has gone away, and there was a time when we said, it's okay, it's only 99-cent plastic beach chairs. And, it's only cell phones. And, now it's billion-dollar commercial jetliners. And we are losing the ability to manufacture. In fact, now we're even, losing the ability to produce food competitively. We have commercial fishermen that are having to compete now, with fish harvested from around the world. And I point that out. These are local industries that are getting hit. But we've seen it with textile. We've seen it with furniture. We're seeing it now with agriculture. We're getting hurt with this unfair trading field. And I mention that because as a conservative, I am a pro-business guy, and I have been a big business guy. I worked at Goldman Sachs. Your listeners know that. I've been a small business guy. I am pro-business. But what I am not is I am not pro-policies that only selectively support big corporations and hurt the rest of the small businesses in this country. So when big corporations and their lobbyists are able to exert influence in order to secure trade deals, and I'll give you an example. I want to repeal NAFTA. Why? Because the biggest beneficiaries and that people know that NAFTA, and listen, the idea of free trade, I think that's wonderful. But the idea was to bring some parity to Mexico and Canada and try and help them out and help us out. Well, the biggest beneficiary isn't even Mexico. Mexico was, by the way, the richest man in the world now is Mexican, for what it's worth. Mm-hmm. But the biggest beneficiary isn't even Mexico. It's China. Because China is now setting up factories in Mexico, bringing in Chinese workers into Mexico, manufacturing products with parts made in China, and then trucking them using NAFTA to bring them into the American economy and avoid tariff by bringing them in by ship. So the biggest beneficiary of NAFTA is China.